Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Plain Speaking, the voice of the Democratic Party. I'm Frank Rosenhoover, your moderator and chair of the Blair County Democratic Party. We have a stellar panel today, and there's a lot of issues that are impacting your life and our lives and the life of everyone in this country. We, as the Democrats, have got to find a way to do something about it, and that is to elect Democratic legislators, councilors, mayors, governors, presidents, because without your help, and I want to say before I introduce the panel, that I realize that the Republicans have an Arctic cap influence in politics in Blair County, but that doesn't mean we Democrats in Blair County shouldn't get out there and vote to get our legislators who would be Democrats, get a Republican governor, a Republican governor out of the chair and put a Democrat in 2014. We've got a lot of work to do between now and then. Let's get through this election coming up in 2013 and focus on a takeover of the State House and the State General Assembly at least. So with that thought in mind, keep thinking in terms of, even though I'm not going to win in Blair County, we can win in Pennsylvania and the United States. So don't feel that just because we are locked out of everything here in Blair County that we don't have an impact statewide and nationally. To my immediate left is our resident historian and research director, George Thompson, who's also the treasurer of our committee. To my immediate right is Robin Aurandt, who's also on the state committee, as well as the vice chair for the 80th district. And to my far left, I love that word left, is Gillian Kratzer, who is one of our staunch Democratic proponents here in Altoona. We're going to start off with a very complicated issue that it would probably take us about a week, George, to explain thoroughly to everybody so they could understand it.
That's true.
It's the Affordable Care Act, which, by the way, has been vilified around the country as the Obamacare Act. And we've heard a lot of comments, criticism. In fact, the Republicans are threatening to shut down the government if they don't rescind it. And there's all kinds of things happening. So I'm just going to ask our panel, since we hear so much of a negative nature, and you as the viewers, I'm sure you do too, through the media, I'm going to ask Robin to give us a brief thought about what she considers to be one of the most outrageous or at least prominent objections that we are hearing about Obamacare.
Well, for one, there's so much misinformation, but my personal favorite is that everyone who does not have health care insurance will be fined $2,000. That is not true. Let me restate that. It is not true. And actually, to go along with that, people think that the government's going to come to your door and maybe take you to jail if you don't have health care insurance. Once again, not true. The actual penalty for not having it is $95 for single and $285 for a family. But that going into the marketplace and other options that you have, there are tax credits and everything else that's going to help people. So you don't have to be afraid that you're not going to go to jail if you don't have insurance.
And the worst thing that can happen there is that the IRS would keep your tax refund, in the amount that you owed. And we're not even talking. We're talking about April, when you file your taxes, April 2015.
Yeah, and actually a family of three can make $80,000 and still be eligible for tax credits for their insurance.
Right, and the $2,000 figure is coming from, that's the penalty if an employer drops health insurance for his employee.
Yeah.
And, of course, today we just heard that UPS is threatening to do that. But that is the penalty. It's, then what happens if the employer drops the employee? Then the employee becomes eligible to go onto the marketplace and choose from a variety of health care plans that are private health care plans. One of the misconceptions in this whole thing is the government takeover of health care. The government isn't taking over anything. The private health insurance companies are going to be providing the health insurance, and the marketplace is a way you can go on, look at what health insurance is available, and depending on your income, you may get a subsidy to help you pay for that.
You know, they tout capitalism out of every other word of their mouth, but yet in things like this and where we should have capitalism, where we should have not a monopoly and more options, they're locking their teeth and not allowing anyone.
Well, many of the ideas were Republican ideas originally.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
happening in Massachusetts right now.
Exactly.
Now, George, you talked in terms of the free market and a person would have the opportunity to choose. Now, there are two options for that to happen. One is a state doing it their own, or the federal government could set up one for the state, right?
Well, the marketplace gave that option. The states could have set up their own system, and many states, basically democratically leaning states, have done this. California, New York has done that, and they already have everything set up. And some of the prices that the insurance companies are bidding. I mean, let's say what is happening. The government is setting up different standards of what insurance companies must cover, and there are, it's not just one policy, there's different standards. The companies, the private health insurance companies that already exist are bidding on. Now, the prices, for example, in New York are coming in 50% less.
California, too.
And California, than people currently pay to the same insurance company. So far, with the known results, it's been a win for the consumer.
For the consumer, yeah.
And now here in Pennsylvania, unfortunately, Pennsylvania has decided that we didn't want involved. Instead of wasting money suing for the elimination of Obamacare, which the Corbett administration did, they could have been spending time setting up our own insurance exchange. But at the very last minute in December, Corbett said, nah, we'll let the federal government set it up. So at this point, I'm not sure what's happening.
So once again, Republicans are constantly touting small government, and yet Corbett is letting the federal government, the bureaucracy, take it. So, I mean, once again, it's hypocrisy. I mean, there's just no end to it. Between their misinformation and their hypocrisy, I think
it should be pointed out that in our healthcare marketplace in Pennsylvania, so far 15 companies have applied to have plans in the marketplace. And I remember when I went to a city council meeting about the UPMC Altoona Hospital merger, one of the councilmen mentioned that he didn't even know if UPMC would be part of the healthcare exchange or Highmark or whoever. Well, Highmark and UPMC and Geisinger and Aetna and several, 15 companies have all applied to have plans on the healthcare marketplace. And, why wouldn't they? They're the major insurers of Pennsylvania. What would it benefit them to not be in on that and to not have more new customers? It makes no sense.
So the options are going to be there for everybody.
The options are absolutely going to be
healthcare.
there.
Yeah, and another thing that Pennsylvania has opted out of so far, and it's part of Obamacare, is the expansion of Medicaid. And to me, this is like totally nonsensical, because different reports that I have, I mean, they're available to anyone. The Pennsylvania Independent Financial Office, which is part of Pennsylvania government, looked at the expansion of Medicaid, said that Pennsylvania will literally lose money by not expanding the health care for those individuals that are not, these are people that are earning too much money to be eligible for Medicaid, that as it exists. So there's a whole group of people out there, they work, but they don't, their employer does not offer health insurance, or they earn so little they can't afford to buy on their own health insurance. Now, these people are going to be eligible for Medicaid, which is fully funded health care. And to Pennsylvania, it's zero cost, because the federal government has said they'll pay for the 100% of the expansion of these inclusion of these people.
For 3 years, and then
for 3 years, and then it drops down to 90%.
Yeah.
So it's just about denying people coverage.
It's an ideological thing that they just want to, I don't know, like not to have Obamacare succeed.
I mean, you should look at the numbers here because they're insane. I was reading yesterday, you know, right now in Pennsylvania for a childless adult, the eligibility cap for Medicaid is $5,500 to make that much money in a year.
Yeah.
Now, the Medicaid expansion would increase it to $15,000 a year. But can you imagine that, you know, you make more than $5,500 and you don't qualify for assistance in that regard? Who needs it more than that? I mean, really.
Yeah, it's 137% of the poverty level. You can earn up to 137% of the poverty level and still be eligible for this Medicaid expansion. And there's a lot of people in Blair County, for example, that meet the criteria. These are working people whose employer doesn't offer health care. And they could get insurance, and instead they either go without treatment or they basically spend a lot of money trying, because once you don't have insurance, then whatever the full charge of that physician is that you go to or that health service is that you provide, you get paid, charged full price.
Well, like now there are sites on the internet where it's like self-surgery. You can watch people operate on themselves because they don't have health insurance. That is abominable. That is, and this is what we're coming to, because people
see, this is the whole thing. We talk about capitalism, and Robin mentioned a moment ago, what Obamacare is offering is that there's going to be exchanges that you can buy, and you mentioned several of the companies that are bidding right now. They would be fools to come in with real high bids, because people are going to shop for good health care, and if your health care between, say, Aetna and UPMC is a $200 a month difference or something, you know, so these people are competing. This is capitalism, and George mentioned it's an ideological battle. It's simply because that guy in the White House came up with this law, and the Democrats had the temerity to pass it. Instead of saying, how can we work together to make it work, they're doing everything. They have, in Texas, you saw it on the TV, Ted Cruz is having this, it's a great big bulletin board there in their meeting room, you know. Why are the Republicans being so anti-American?
They want Obama
they're offering no alternative.
That's it.
I mean, it's
there is no
totally
alternative.
against Obamacare, and then a silence with what they're going to offer. Our federal legislator, Bill Schuster, he has a little thing on his website. Obamacare does not offer the solutions we need for our country's health care problems. So that's all he says.
So what are his?
Well, he doesn't say much about what he wants to do.
They want to go back to the way it was, where just millions and millions of people just didn't have insurance.
Well, I'd like to point this out to Representative Schuster. You know, before Obamacare, insurance companies were allowed to deny you coverage based on pre-existing conditions, and that includes some mental health conditions, I might add. They were allowed to do what's called gender rating, where women were routinely charged more money, as a third as much money, sometimes as much as 100% more than a man, where they would not cover pregnancy costs. And these are all things that have to happen now. You know, plans are required to cover well-woman checkups. Plans are required to cover, you know, no-cost contraceptives if you want them. It is a benefit to all Americans, and to say otherwise is simply ludicrous.
Because we know that preventative care is so much cheaper than, you know, waiting till some horrible thing happens.
Yeah.
Well, even when you talk about the cost, even the Congressional Budget Office has said that over a period of 10 years there are going to be hundreds of billions of dollars that are going to be saved.
$1 trillion.
Well, I hate to throw the trillions up, because I know it was high, but I mean, it's going to save people money. So why wouldn't we pursue a plan?
Well, right.
It seems vindictive.
Right, and Bill Schuster mentions the $1.2 trillion it's going to cost, conveniently ignoring that we already pay for much of this health care, and like you point out, Robin, in inefficient ways. People that don't have insurance show up at the hospital, they get treatment. Typically, they can't pay the bill, and eventually, a few years down the road, the hospitals get reimbursed for uncompensated care by the government.
Yeah.
So we're paying for it anyway.
We're paying for it anyway.
Exactly.
And I brought this up before at the state prisons. The prisoners, they all get health care. I mean, you can't throw a person in prison and then refuse to treat them.
Yeah.
They would be eligible for health care. So that expenditure is already being made by Pennsylvania. The difference would be it would be switched to Medicaid, really.
Yeah.
And you see that, and you mentioned the prisoners. There was a big series of articles in several of the newspapers in the last couple of days about the tremendous increase in costs for all of these folks who've been in there for life sentences and everything. They're getting older. They need transplants. They're going blind. They have diabetes. They cannot live good functional lives, and they're getting obviously the best care the prisons can offer, but because it's a state expense, obviously they're not going to give you the same kind of coverage as you'd get if you were outside, because nobody knows what they're doing the inside there. So this whole thing is going to open health care at an affordable cost to every person.
Right.
So
and you mentioned some of the things with mental health at the county level.
Yeah.
Medicaid would help in that regard. People that don't have insurance, once they get an insurance policy, I think mental health is a mandated coverage of some form.
There will be, according to the White House, the Obamacare expands mental health and substance use disorder benefits and parity protections for 62 million Americans. And parity protections is just assuring that the cost of mental health benefits are not substantially different from the costs of surgical benefits.
Well, it's a dilemma. It's very upsetting to see that the opposition party is doing nothing to improve the health care of Americans. They're preventing hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians from getting the coverage they need that Obamacare would give them. And they don't want to expand the Medicare and lose $1 billion because they're being ignorant. They're being obstreperous.
Yeah.
The view is, why don't you folks can help us and call guys like Schuster, send them a letter, send an email, demand that if they don't like Obamacare to come up with a better plan, because there is none. So,
And one of the, of course, rumors at the beginning was how expensive health care was going to become with Obamacare. Actually, the health care costs they've risen, but at a lesser rate than previously.
Than what they
Big article
had
in
been.
USA Today about
Right,
that.
it's not some of the horror stories that everyone on the Republican side was happy to disseminate aren't proving to be true. And of course, it's my belief that once there is going to be a rough implementation period, and Bill Schuster, he proudly announces he's introducing the No IRS Implementation of Obamacare Act in his newsletter here. Well, the IRS is part of the implementation, because part of the subsidies that people get, they're going to depend on your income. And so the IRS is tied into the healthcare market. When you go to buy your insurance, it's supposed to automatically tell you what subsidies you would get, or it may switch you. There's many people out there that are already eligible for Medicaid, but for reasons unknown to me, they don't apply for it. It's puzzling to me.
I think it's ignorance. I think they honestly don't know.
They have to file a tax return, I think, to get Medicaid. So that's possibly one of the problems. If your income is so low, you don't owe any federal taxes. But some people then say, well, I won't file.
I think a problem is this, honestly, George. The Republicans have created this atmosphere wherein somebody who receives aid from the government is somebody to be looked down upon. And I think there are a lot of really hardworking people that just don't want to get aid because then they feel like
they're moochers.
And that's not the case. you know.
Exactly.
That's the tragedy, because over the past several years, at least 6 years, 6 years, the Republican Party has engaged in an unwarranted, expansive system of telling lies and half-truths to scare people.
Yeah.
They say that, just remember those death panels and all that stuff. They say if they don't have serious alternatives, and so like in any other argument, you ever been in an argument when you have the better side of somebody, and what do they end up doing? They start insulting you and saying nasty
Personal
things.
attacks.
Personal attacks. Instead of saying, well, here's my alternative, they don't have one.
Yeah.
So this law is going to benefit every single person, maybe not to the extent that everybody's saying, I'm going to have health care paid. Now, you're not going to have health care paid, but you're going to have a better opportunity for quality health care over your lifetime.
And I always, in regard to people feeling guilty about accepting care from the government, let me remind everyone out there that people that have a lot of money, they spend thousands of dollars on lawyers writing laws that give them more money. They spend millions of dollars on lobbyists to make sure the legislation that they want is passed. And so anyone out there who's thinking that they're taking advantage of the government by accepting either a subsidy on their health care or getting it as Medicaid for free, so to speak, they have to put everything, food stamps, there's all sorts of programs that people actually don't apply. They're eligible for these programs and they don't apply for them, and I think that's the reason they feel guilty.
Yeah.
Hey, the other side of the coin, they spend thousands of dollars getting the laws written the way they want to benefit them.
To get tax breaks and
so don't feel guilty.
That's a good point, George, and I think the viewers should take that to heart. Don't feel guilty because you're getting a subsidy. You don't have the financial means to live a standard of living that you would like to do. And so don't feel guilty because you got to reach out to the government for help. As George said, you have billionaires who hire full-time attorneys who are finding ways to reduce their taxes and everything. So bottom line is, folks, Obamacare is going to be a very successful, broad-based approach to health care for everyone. And we just ask you to be patient and don't believe these lies and half-truths. Call George.
And you know what? The website that the government set up, healthcare.gov, there's a wealth of information on it. And it's so easy to use. I mean, everything's right there at your fingertips.
There's also, I have a bunch of these printouts, the Obamacare facts. Just type into your computer Obamacare facts and you'll get a list, and here are about 14 different areas. I mean, it's full of all kind of information that tells you about it. And one statement I just want to very quickly says, Obamacare reforms and regulates insurance companies and healthcare standards, but doesn't control your healthcare. It lowers what 98% of Americans pay for taxes, decreases the deficit, improves government-run healthcare programs like Medicare. By cutting out wasteful spending, it expands Medicaid to cover 17 million uninsured people. I mean, these facts alone should make people realize the Congressional Budget Office says it's going to save money. The insanity. Let's stop these attacks.
And the only way to do it is with the facts.
Or to elect Democratic congresspeople, governors, senators, General Assembly members.
Yes. Absolutely.
Folks, let's do that. I don't want to say turn the rascals out, but let's at least look at who's the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we can't cover Obamacare and the good things it does. I really get to everybody's personal peak, but I think they came up as we discussed the whole thing. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Let's take a look at Pennsylvania. Under this Pennsylvania Republican-run government, they have the governorship, they have the Senate, they have the General Assembly. They can't even come together and present a budget that includes some of the most important governmental functions, such as transportation. They don't have a transportation bill. The Secretary of Transportation has deemed 50 bridges right now in Pennsylvania closed because of the danger.
You know, in Pennsylvania right now, according to Senator Bob Casey's office, there are 5,543 deficient bridges. So these are bridges that, you know, are functional-ish.
For how long?
For how long? That's 80 in Blair County alone. Allegheny County has 292 deficient bridges.
Pittsburgh has the most bridges in the world.
Yes.
In the world.
They get a lot of bridges. So.
You know what's going to happen? Nothing until these bridges close and people have to drive farther and farther and farther to get where they want to go, taking more time, missing appointments, missing things. You know, a friend of mine once said, one of our very good vice chairs of the committee, unfortunately, people do not begin to help affect change until they're really hurting.
Yeah.
And I mean, where are we going on this? George, I know you sit back and you do a lot of research on these things. And
well, I did watch on the Pennsylvania Cable Network some of the hearings for the transportation bill, and actually Governor Corbett did come up with a request for a substantial amount of money that I believe the Senate passed a greater amount of money than Governor Corbett had put in. There was a study, I might say, I believe it was under Corbett, but it might have even been under Governor Rendell, that asked for even more money to bring our roads up to standards. The problem seemed to be the House. You have a number of Tea Party people in the House that just refused to spend money. Well, let's say it this way. They refuse to raise taxes. Well, one of the problems right now is there actually is no money to spend for any of these proposals until you increase taxes. And that was the killer in the House. Not enough representatives were willing to increase the gross receipts tax. They weren't going to make it a tax directly on the gasoline. They were going to tax the distributors or the manufacturers, I guess is the way to say it, of the gasoline products. And then, of course, they would have had to pass along the cost.
Yeah.
But, you know, whatever. They sort of avoided the use of the word taxes by doing it that way. But in any case, they weren't. The House wasn't willing to go along with this tax increase, so consequently, there's no money to spend.
Yeah.
what's the answer? What can we tell the viewers that they can do to help to get this Republican-controlled administration to start making decisions that are going to improve? I mean, the roads, I mean, how many of you people driving around the city and the county have found deplorable situations with potholes and all?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's getting worse, and what's going to happen?
Our infrastructure really needs...
The thing is, and I keep saying this, and I'm labeled a tax and spend Democrat, but the people, and please understand this, viewers, there's only one source of revenue the government has. One. That's taxes. And if you want services, you got to pay.
Well, you know what? What's wrong with being a tax and spend Democrat?
Nothing.
You tax and then you spend. You don't just spend.
Right.
Because that's the problem right now.
And
There's
we
a
don't-
lot of spending, not enough taxes.
That's right. And we spend it wisely
Absolutely.
on the people who aren't able sometimes to take care of themselves. We're not elitists. We don't condemn the women who are raising children in a one-parent home and who need food stamps. We're not cutting billions out of that. We're not reducing care for pregnant women, preschool education.
Or keeping them warm in the winter.
Keeping them warm in the winter.
The basic needs of human, what we need.
It's heartless of the Republicans to pass legislation.
You know, and in Texas, I just read this on Tom Hartman's blog a few days ago, the Texas roads are so bad, they're considering just letting some of the roads go back to shale and posting a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Is this what we want for Pennsylvania?
No.
That's like horse and buggy days.
I'm going to go to Texas and set up a franchise for jackasses and sleds.
Well, one of the other criticisms the Republicans in the House made with the transportation bill is this idea that the government does things inefficiently. And they have this belief there's some magical thing out there that can make transportation be more efficient. But, if your idea of efficiency is to have private contractors do the work, that's already being done in Pennsylvania, and it's been done that way for years.
Yeah.
The PennDOT staff, they are responsible for basically plowing, and even they're contracting a lot of the plowing out. So this idea that somehow private industry is going to do something better, it's really being tried right now, and I'm not sure that it costs money to get these contractors.
Yeah. And they are driven by the profit motive. Government isn't run by profit motive.
Absolutely.
And so when you subcontract anything out, you have no control, direct control really, over the efficiency of the operation. You can threaten to not renew their contract and that, but that doesn't, just because it goes private, that is no guarantee that you're going to get better service.
Exactly. Actually, I attended the commission, the City of Altoona Commission on Government. I'm not sure that they've been changing the name of it, but it's basically the Home Rule Commission. I guess I'll say it that way.
I'll change my terminology. Scratch that from my note here.
The one fellow who represents ASME for the City of Altoona, he basically summarized it. We haven't had a big snowfall in a few years, but they keep reducing the staff in the city, the people that plow the roads, and at one time they would say positively 12 hours is the longest it'll take for us to clear roads. I guess he said last year they sort of bumped it up to 24 hours based on the amount of staff they have. He said if we get a big snowfall here in Altoona, the staff has been reduced to such a level that it may even go to 36 hours before everything's cleared.
Do you know what's interesting about that, George, is that I read about that 12, 24, 36 hours in the Altoona Mirror. They didn't mention the staff reductions. That was not mentioned.
Yeah. And that's why it takes longer.
Yeah,
and it made
it sound very much like a different situation.
Well, they're trying to insinuate. Insinuatus maximus erroneus. However, right? I mean,
once again, misinformation.
Well, in that Altoona Mirror article, they also implied that simply going home rule is somehow going to also magically make everything better.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'd like to have more details on how, going home rule, how it's going to make it better, because I have a funny feeling that what they're talking about would be more revenue. I mean, are they talking home rule's going to make things more efficient?
You can, how can you make things more efficient if you're cutting people and resources? You can't possibly, I don't understand how anybody who has any control over any kind of budget that they deal with in life, if you're a family, if you have your own business, or if you're just a single person who's living without whatever, you know that every single year, everything you consume, gasoline, food, utilities, supplies, oil, everything goes up every single year. So who in their right mind can say that we're going to freeze or even cut the source of revenue and try to maintain? Don't we get that?
How does that benefit an economy?
It can't. It can only destroy the economy.
Exactly.
And I mean, am I being thick-headed? I mean, isn't it a simple rule that if everything I consume, everything I use goes up in price year after year after year, and I freeze my salary at a certain level, I will never be able to maintain a standard of living or operations or efficiency without an increase in revenue.
Republicans have taken common sense out of the equation.
That's an oxymoron, common sense, I'm afraid.
Well, and this idea that Pennsylvania's high-tax state is absolutely false.
Absolutely.
False.
George has it. Let's lay it on him.
Well, West Virginia actually is one of the highest cost of the percentage of income that people have versus the revenue they pay in taxes. Pennsylvania is actually a little higher than the United States average. It's at approximately 5.87% according to the state and local government finance data system. It's lower than West Virginia, Delaware, New York, Michigan, North Carolina. In other words, some of the more industrialized states. And actually, the average of those states are 6.34%. The problem with Pennsylvania is actually how they raise their revenue, because one of the things that you discover if you compare Pennsylvania taxes to other states is that a lot of our taxes here in Pennsylvania are based on real estate taxes. Yes. And that actually hits low-income people higher because everyone has to live somewhere. You know, income tax is low. In Pennsylvania, the only states that have a lower income tax are some states don't have any.
Right, Texas,
like Florida is one, Texas is one, state of Washington is one. Okay, so they don't have an income tax, but Pennsylvania has 3.07%, which is lower than any other state that has an income tax. And you know, this idea that Pennsylvania is like overtaxed, I don't know, people, no one likes to pay taxes. I don't like to pay taxes, but I like services. And so if you keep not paying taxes, you're going to end up with no services.
Well, and how can we say that so that people understand that? I mean, it blows my mind.
Republicans have a head start on us. They started this misinformation propaganda stuff back when Reagan was in, and it's continued since. It's just snowballed. So they have 30 years of lies.
Right, and they forgot that Reagan raised taxes 11 times.
Yeah, that we have to catch up on.
He's such an icon of conservative principles and cheaper government and smaller government, and yet it all expanded under him. And taxes. I don't know, can we develop some sort of program that we can get to people? Do we have to sit down with every person in the county one-on-one?
I don't even know if then, I mean, because I've been reading your book that you recommended to me, The Republican Brain by Chris Mooney, and I'm just wondering, it is, I'm just wondering if there's any,
you should read that sometime.
Any use.
Honest to gosh, I am flummoxed.
That's a good word.
I mean, honestly, the state of our nation today, I mean, we are getting into such a negative mindset. They're not even trying to talk to one another. They try to out-ugly each other. Well, not to them so much even. We rarely come out and condemn the Republicans, you know, by calling them names and accusing Obama of being a socialist and a Muslim and all that. We don't do that to these people.
Well, I'll tell you one condemnation that has come out, but it is a condemnation backed by facts, and that is Representative Brian Sims wrote a really good op-ed the other day on was it on Salon? It was on Philly.com about the state of education in Pennsylvania and the extent to which the Corbett administration has absolutely abandoned the students of Pennsylvania. You know, 83% of schools in Pennsylvania are underfunded. 83%.
That's tragic.
And that is insane.
And where's the outcry? Why aren't the citizens?
And he cut $1 billion from education. So I mean,
and then wants to use his liquor privatization to put $1 billion back into education and then be the hero because he's put money into education.
Look, you cannot run government by quote unquote sinful activities. How can you possibly? Pretty soon they'll be legalizing prostitution to make money. I mean, gambling is not a way to fund government. I mean, I don't care what anybody says. You're just ignoring the fact that taxation is the economic arm of government. And you can't try to get other outside forces to do that. And you look what he did to the Philadelphia schools. The state took them over 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. Now they have to borrow $50 million from outside forces just to open the schools.
And there are some of the schools that are considering asking parents for $637
Oh my
a
gosh.
student just to have supplies, just to be able to run the schools. And
George.
that is the end of
some
free and
stats here.
equal education.
Yeah, it is.
See,
Absolutely.
I mean, the Constitution says the state shall fund and manage a thorough and efficient system of public education. Not private, not parochial, not charter, not homeschooling, a public system of education. The Constitution says that. Well, George, I know you...
Well, what I was looking at here, not every school district got hit as hard as, let's say, our area.
Yeah.
And in fact, one school in our area got some additional money, and that was in the paper not too many weeks ago. Somehow Phillipsburg, Osceola ended up with $500 million of supplemental funding. In other words, the state distributes money based on formulas.
There were 21 districts that got, extra funding. Not all of them needed it.
And
most of them did not.
Some of them got a lot of money. Allentown got $8 million extra.
Wow.
And of course the common denominator there, York, was one of the other school districts. They originally had $56 million from the state, and they got an additional $5.5 million. So I guess what I'm saying here is your legislator was rather important on some of these supplementals. And I guess we have weak legislators around here.
Look at who we have.
Yeah.
The libertarian.
Enough said.
Well, he wouldn't bring money into the school district even if he could.
He has made it known that he doesn't support education, firefighters, police, transportation, economic development. Anyway.
And I want to bring up, while it's on my mind, the Channel 10 yesterday had a little article or news clip about Bedford. There's some charter school in Bedford that they were going to open up, and apparently because of the picture, Headstrom, the what did they manufacture?
Company,
they had left the area, and so they were using their building for the charter school. Well, I'm not sure how it all happened, but in the end, whatever the charter school wanted to do, they thought they had the building, the Headstrom building, and they didn't. So they have a whole bunch of students, I think 230 students.
Oh, my.
Now I wonder what's going to happen to those students. I have a funny feeling they're going to end up in the public school system, and everyone doesn't worry about it. Somehow the public school system is going to expand all of a sudden to accommodate these people. What I'm pointing out is Pennsylvania has a lot of charter schools.
Too many.
There's about 260,000 students in Pennsylvania attending charter schools.
Oh, my.
And of course, a lot of these schools, not all of them, but a lot of them are private companies running them. In other words, if they make a profit, an individual is profiting from these things, which puts me on high alert. To monitor these schools.
Well,
and they also have no testing to say whether they're...
That's the dichotomy here. The state of Pennsylvania excludes all of these charter and private schools and parochial schools from the same level of state control that they put public schools under. No testing, no accountability, and they're pouring millions into these places.
$675 million has been siphoned into charter schools.
And there is no evidence that across the board, charter schools are better than private schools and than public schools. Right. None whatsoever. In fact, the information that's coming out shows that generally they are below standard when it comes to education. So the whole thing is, folks, again, if you want quality education, if you want good roads and bridges that are good, and you want adequate police protection and adequate fire protection, you've got to pay for it. Right? Nobody disagrees? I mean,
no dissension here.
Folks, I'm telling you, we are in such a disarray. We've got to do something. Let's elect people who care.
Exactly.
Now let's take a look at Pennsylvania. Now, the other things are happening. Right now the Commonwealth Court has said that the voter ID law should be put on hold.
Again.
There was an editorial in the Altoona Mirror today says it'll be put on hold eternally. And so that's another thing that's attacking, the average person. It's attacking the Democrats, the college students, the poor people, the black people, the Hispanics. And are we going to let that happen? No, thank God the judge on the Commonwealth Court at least had the foresight to say, look, until I am convinced that it is not diminishing, it's going to be on hold. So that's one thing we're doing. And in the areas of services to the people. Now, you mentioned the House Bill 300 is another way that the government of Pennsylvania is addressing an issue of equality.
House Bill 300, and there's an accompanying Senate Bill 300, would add to the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act the categories of sexual orientation and gender identity or expression to anti-discrimination laws. Currently, it's race, religious creed, national origin, color, gender, or biological sex, and so it would add sexual orientation and gender identity or expression. Currently, if you are a gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender person, you can be fired just for that. You can be fired for a perception of that. And that is absolutely wrong. There are people that live in our state that have to hide who they are just to maintain gainful employment. And that is awful. And there's no reason that we shouldn't do this. Right now, there are 91 representatives that are co-sponsoring the bill. That includes, by the way, 12 Republicans. I wish it were more, but 12.
Any local
No,
none of them.
Not no.
That's a shame.
It is.
It is. But to be honest, I don't think that our personal Representative John McGinnis is in favor of any anti-discrimination laws because he feels that
he likes discrimination.
That people should be free to, discriminate against people if they want to, I suppose. And the Senate version of the bill currently has 25 co-sponsors. That's fantastic because the Pennsylvania State Senate only has 50 members, so that's
half.
That's half. That's great.
Well, a little bit related to this topic is DOMA. Yeah. And, Kathleen Kane, our Attorney General, got a lot of criticism when she decided, I am not going to defend what she views as Pennsylvania's unconstitutional restriction of marriage.
Absolutely.
I applaud her for, first of all, on a moral basis for taking that stand, but really for all those fiscal conservatives that may be watching us, why waste state money appealing the Supreme Court decision. To me, it's a losing cause.
Yeah,
it's a little bit like this voter ID thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Corbett didn't hesitate to spend all this money trying to implement voter ID without one documented case that there actually was cheating when people go to voter
In the original
fraud.
case, the Attorney General at the time was a woman who she had taken over, and she testified before Commonwealth Court when asked the question, do you have any statistical data that shows there has been discrimination in voting? She said, we have absolutely none. How can a court then rule?
Voter fraud.
Yeah, on the voter fraud bill, yeah. But the whole thing is this thing about non-discriminatory treatment of citizens. This is America. We're supposed to be free whether you are gay, lesbian, transgender, whether you're black, white, Hispanic. Why, it's about time we woke up. And Pennsylvania finally now has a bill that's being moved a little bit.
Yeah. Well,
will we ever get there?
This is the third time this bill has come up. It was the primary sponsor is Representative Dan Frankel. It came up in 2008, in 2011. 2013, this is the most support that it's gotten, and the ball's really rolling. There are more representatives supporting it almost every day. So
see, whatever happened to the admonition that all men are created equal?
Yeah.
Except, well, at least Pennsylvania is considering that, and I think any thinking person has to understand that it is not right. Those who believe in Christianity and the Bible and things of that sort. You know, that's antithesis to that too. You know, you treat everybody equally. Any other issues that are happening in Pennsylvania we have to take a look at?
Well, the failed sale of the state store
Liquor
system,
stores.
or as Sheets would like to say it,
Free beer.
Yeah, free my beer.
Free my beer.
Free my
Which,
beer.
by the way, has nothing to do with the state store system. Which also, I think, highlights what really happened so far to that legislation. It's not that anyone is trying to protect the state workers. I think the beer distributors, they've paid extra money to have their right to distribute beer, and the taverns too, on the six-packs that they can sell. And it seems to me that the argument that the government should not be involved with the sale of beer, wine and spirits, you know, making it an ideological thing, the government, I don't know what the people that make this argument think the government should do, but it's not to sell that. It should be a private enterprise. Well, the beer distributors also were going to lose out on this thing. Let's say it the way it is. That was pushed by Walmarts, by Sheets's, by big box stores, corporations that wanted to start getting profit from the sale of beer and wine.
And the other side of it is the beer distributors organization that doesn't want to give up their hold on that industry.
Oh, right, and they paid extra money for this.
Look, the state liquor system made over $100 million last year. And that includes, after paying all of their staff and all of the things that they have to pay to make the thing run, that's profit. That means after all expenses.
I know, why give a cash cow away?
Yeah, well, because again, it's the Republican concept and Corbett's concept. When he ran and was elected, he told the citizens of Pennsylvania, get your yellow pages out. And if you see somebody in there, some company, some entity that can provide any kind of service that government now does, give me a call and we'll privatize.
Now a little bit did pass in that regard. The Senate did pass some sort of privatization, but they sort of went midway as far as I know. They allowed the state stores to be wholesalers, essentially. And I guess the idea was, well, first of all, that's what they currently do. I mean, I walk into a state store and I buy a bottle or two of wine. But the state stores are also set up when taverns buy their alcohol, they go to the state store.
Yeah.
And so you have this wholesale operation that the state stores have. They bid out from whoever's making the beer, the wine, they bid it out, and they get good prices. And they warehouse that and then distribute it to the taverns and stuff. And under the Senate bill, that was going to still happen, even though they were, I guess, going to close the state stores for people like myself. They were still going to have them as a wholesale distributor. And so far, though, the whole thing has sort of died. So I assume it's going to be resurrected again.
One of the big problems are people who live in the real rural areas, too. You know, private enterprise, capitalism is built on the profit system. And if you have a store in Johnsonburg that, it has a very limited population, you have one in St. Mary's, you have one in Ridgeway, you have one in Wilcox, And so what happens if somebody decides privatization to take them over and they're not making money and they close them? Well, I'm not saying that, I'm supporting drinking, but yet there are people who drink and that's their business, as long as they do it responsibly. So what's going to happen to the availability of that product that government at least was permitted to be sold if it's privatized? You could cut it out of any town or city that doesn't have X number of people.
And create a monopoly.
Yeah. And then what do they do with the prices?
Yeah.
I mean, I was up in New York City over the weekend. A pack of cigarettes, $14.85.
I believe they have a much higher tax on cigarettes.
Because,
I mean, not that much, but everything's more expensive in New York City.
Okay, we have 4 minutes left. Is there something you want to put on the table. George, I know you.
Well,
I feel so guilty when George comes. Honestly, I truly feel so guilty because George is hidden down here, but you can't see this. But he has somebody he comes with him to carry all of his stuff. But I laud him for his diligence and his great effort.
Well, most of these papers I've run over the course of like 4 years, so the topics never get resolved, so they keep coming up. I mean, we could talk a little bit about Altoona's Home Rule Commission,
and I'll never say that other word again.
I think we should distinguish what's going on, because we ourselves here on this panel were a little confused. You know, the Act 47 keeps getting thrown around, but then it's different, actually, than the Home Rule Commission.
Right.
And so perhaps a little primer on the difference between the two is needed. The city's already voted on Act 47. And by the way, they've paid, last program I said $500,000, and then I hesitated. You know, that sounded like a lot. Well, I went back and looked. Actually, $480,000 is the bid. We're paying people, for law firms and stuff,
to come in,
like $275 an hour to range. There's a range of prices, $230 an hour, and they've already come up with the Act 47 recommendations, and a lot of them have to do, you know, with labor, and it's. All the contracts are expiring December 31st of 2013. You know, so that's all going to have to be negotiated within the bounds of what they've said.
What we can do. You know, the thing about that whole thing, it's the working class is not the cause of the problem. We are part of what's happening in this country. And if you keep laying off governmental employees of all sorts, teachers, you're going to sadly impact the economy, because their spending habits are going to decrease, and the whole economy is going to go further and further into the dumps, and you are erroneously blaming the wrong people.
Yeah.
Well, I want to point out to our viewers that if anyone's bored, they can go on the PCNTV.com, and they can bring up programs. It's a little link there, Pennsylvania Cable Network TV, but it's PCNTV.com, and local governments in distress. And this is all about Pennsylvania. And it's a series of programs. So far they have 4 programs. I guess there will be a 5th program. And a lot of the issues that Altoona is facing, of course, are faced by a number of municipalities in Pennsylvania. And it has little to do. In fact, Altoona actually got mentioned in the program by Pennsylvania Economy League panelists that Altoona is well run. So as far as being wasteful or anything, he didn't say that. It's factors really beyond Altoona's control.
Okay, we're down to the last minute, and I know we can't get to everything, and I hope that what we brought to your attention today, folks, is something that you'll start to think about. We've got to elect Democrats in there who care about the people, who care about Altoona, Blair County, Pennsylvania, and the United States. Please help us. We've got to get the vote out. Vote this fall, even though you can't elect a lot of Democratic candidates in this county because we don't have a lot of them running, but we can make an impact in Pennsylvania and in the country. Please vote. Don't turn your back and say, my vote doesn't count. It does. I thank the panel very much for their stellar job, and I look forward within several weeks from now to have another program. And remember, somebody cares for you, the Democratic Party. Thank you.